Hey all, how's it going? Okay, so we're going to continue our series on compression today, and this will be compression specifically with a bass drum. So there's a lot of ways we could do this because sometimes bass drums are mic'd with more than one mic to get different tones of the drum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an inside mic and an outside mic, and I'm going to give you examples of each one individually and then together, and maybe some sound combinations on how to use compression. I also did a pretty dead sound and a slightly more open sound, so we can go about it that way too. I'm omitting size of kick drum, and with a hole or without a hole in the front head. We're just going with a hole, just kind of standard things, so we can get a grasp of compression and how we could use it, and maybe getting creative with it sonically. All right, so let's dive in here. I have my Fit 47 on the outside as usual, and what I'm going to do here is no EQ and no gates, and this is hitting the bass drum quietly, relatively quietly, and similar to the snare, we are just going to move some knobs around here and see what kind of sounds we can get, and mess with the ratio too. Then we'll do the inside kick, and then we'll combine them and see what kind of sounds we get with some different settings in between those. Okay, so first, outside kick, hit relatively quietly. Here is no compression. Okay, I'm going to use this distressor plugin again, which is kind of a go-to compressor for me. I like the kind of options it gives, the emulations for other plugins, but again, could be any plugin, any outboard gear, any style of compressor, just some general rules for this. Okay, outside kick, let's mess with the input first and see what this does. Killing any of the attack here. We have a slow attack. We have a quick release. So we're not squashing this thing. You can see from the fader that it lets go of the transient really quick, and we're getting a more boomy sound with the more input. We're helping squash the sustain with the input. So let's dial it back a little, and we're staying at a 2-to-1 ratio here, and let's just mess with the attack. So we'll get less initial transient from this at first. So let's stay here. I don't hear too much of a difference, but it is cutting off that initial attack a bit. So let's mess with the ratio while we're here in this quick attack setting. Okay, so you can hear we start to get a kind of totally different tone from that, and it could be interesting. That could be interesting, just trying to hold on to some sustain if you have the initial attack from another mic, holding on to some sustain with this outside kick mic, or if you just want to go for something super funky, a lot of compression here we start to get some interesting tones. Let's go back to slow attack, and we'll mess with the release here, and we're going to shorten the sound by having a quicker release. Sorry, a slower release. Okay, so you can see there, if we're holding onto that transient by having a slow release, if maybe if you didn't dampen your bass drum as much as you wanted to, you didn't realize it, you can get a much tighter sound by having the slow release because the compressor is hanging on to that sound. Okay, for fun's sake, and of course we're on the nuke setting here, so let's just check it out. Let's check out the ratios here with the slow release. Okay, so the higher the ratio on that, the more it's hanging onto it, flattening out the sound. Pretty interesting. Pretty cool way to manipulate your sound afterwards if you need to do that. Okay, so let's go to the inside kick now, being hit relatively quietly. And we'll go through the same stuff here. So I'm using this PZM mic, which is has a lot of attack. I wanted to get something pretty drastic from the FET 47. This mic has a lot of attack, and it has a pretty good amount of low end too. We're not EQing anything, and let's just mess with the input and see how much kind of nasty attack we can get with this. First, here it is without any compression. Okay, let's mess with the input now. Okay, a lot of the input is just volume, and we're not affecting it too much here. So again, we'll go through the attack now, and we'll try to dial some of this attack off and see what it's like. We're going to get a kind of funky knocky sound, which could be cool if maybe you were trying to emulate maybe like a 70s disco track or something, or maybe something not recorded so well, but kind of has a vibe. So check this out. Okay, by the time we get to the end there, it sounds, fairly strange and not too good. Let's mess with the ratio at this setting and see what happens. What we'd be trying to do there is just take off some of that attack that this mic has. So let's go back to slow attack, and we'll mess with the release. Let's get this down to 3-1 here. See what we can do. Again, this should dry up the sound, tighten up the sound in your kick drum. Okay, so you can see by this slow release, we're really hanging on to that, and it really makes a nice, short, defined punch. Great. This is a great compressor for that. There are others. I often use a DBX 160 when I'm recording a hardware version, and it's great for getting this just initial punch. Let's raise the ratio here with this setting and check out the difference. Okay, subtle differences when we start to mess with the ratio. It seemed like it was clipping, so I pulled the input down, and to me the tonality of the drum, the hit improved, and it's actually pretty cool with the super high ratio. I think it's a really nice, appealing thud for a certain sound in my ears. Okay, so our outside kick is on the left here, and our inside kick is on the right. I'm going to keep the inside kick kind of at our short, punchy sound, and I'm just going to mess with the attack of the outside kick. And what you'll see is when I slow the attack of the outside kick, we're going to get more attack from the inside kick. So you're going to hear the punch difference, because essentially what you're doing is you're delaying the transient of the, let's go this way, you're delaying the transient of the outside kick of what you're hearing. So they're not hitting together, they're hitting like this, and the sounds are then, they're actually playing well together by not landing at the same time, if that makes some more sense. We're creating space for each one to do its thing. So let's check that out. Let's start with the attack slow and move it up to fast on the outside kick mic. Okay, so as you hear, the more we quicken the attack on the outside kick, we're getting more attack from the inside kick. Let's mess with the release time and see what we get. Okay, that's quite a nice sound, I think. It's really interesting. We're really getting the character of the inside kick, but we're getting the kind of oomph of the outside kick. Pretty interesting. Okay, let's do something just to mess with it. I was talking about this knocky sound earlier. Let's keep this attack slow and the release quick, and do the opposite with the inside mic and just hear the difference. Okay, so you can see that we can start to carve out some of these sounds from these two mics. Pretty interesting. Okay, for dynamic purposes, let's move on to hitting the drum harder with the outside kick and see what we make of this. Okay, so for these purposes, I'll just start to roll through, since I've shown like slower examples, I'll just start to roll through some settings so you hear the outside kick hit hard. So that sound gets pretty interesting with the high input and the fast attack and the fast release. We start to get this kind of almost old school roomy sound. To me, it sounds like a big older bass drum in a room and like a room mic. Pretty interesting emulation. Could be super useful for certain things. Okay, try not to mind the changing camera angle. Okay, we're going from this kind of, pretend old school sound, and moving on from there. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. That's almost, to me, that sounds like a sampled sound or a synthesis created sound, like a programmed thing. Could be super cool in the context of a kit, especially with super tight mics. Nice possibility. I'm going to remember that one. Quick attack, slow release, everything kind of cranked. Nuke position here, input super high. Pretty interesting. Okay, let's go on to the inside kick, soloed here. All right, so you can hear just the input knob on this, on the compressor here, is really changing the sound a lot. Something you want to be careful of if you hit the drums hard, or if you're recording a drummer who hits the drums quite hard, your input settings can do a lot, so that, as we've seen. So in this case, I'm going to turn the input way low and then start messing around from there. Okay, let's check out the release with this attack setting. I didn't hear a whole lot of difference in that. Actually, let's stay right here and mess with the ratio and see what happens. Doesn't seem to be affecting it too much. Let's go to the release. We'll go back to a low ratio. you can hear. We got some pretty strange sounds in there, but as far as like just trying to get a nice, very clear, pinpointed attack with this particular mic, if you're going for that thing, we're really getting that with certain settings on this. And the most interesting thing to me about this whole experiment right here is the input on this, and just keeping it low so we're not overdriving the compressor, we're not hitting it too hard, and really trying to keep the natural sound of the mic. But when we have that slow release, we're really containing the sound to just a punch. There's no real decay or sustain, and for like just a nice punchy rock sound, this inside kick setting is going to be super useful. Okay, so again, this is the kick out over here on the left, kick in on the right, and we're going to hear them both together now. And let's see what this does. I'm going to mess with the outside kick, with the inside kick with this very short, punchy sound. Okay, pretty interesting. So that's our kind of strange old school setting, for lack of a better term, on our kind of roomy old school bass drum sound on our outside kick, along with this punchy inside kick. And of course, mixing those at different levels, we could get some pretty interesting sounds. I'm just going to mess with the attack a little more and the release on the outside kick, and just see what else we can get. Okay, so to me, again, that's very interesting. It's almost like a programmed, sampled electronic synthesis type sound. Let's see, we got a slow attack on the outside kick, and a quick release, or a slow release on the outside kick also, and it sounds like we're getting some overdrive. And these are both at super high ratios here. We're on the nuke setting on both of these things. A lot of possibilities. Compression, your friend, for creating interesting things. So here's our outside kick with an open, much less dampening in the bass drum. Just our outside kick. Let's start with a low ratio. Not messing with the attack or release too much, and just see what we get with the input here. I like that setting a lot, where the input is much higher, so we're hearing some of this sustain because we're getting more volume, and then taking off some of this transient with the attack. We're taking some of that initial kind of high part away from it without messing with the EQ, of course, and getting some interesting sounds there. So let's draw this up with the release and see what happens. That's a nice sound. Anywhere in these slower release stages, I really like it. Let's mess with the ratio in there and see what happens. So you can hear we're starting to get a little bit distorted, a little more woofy. Um, and then as I turned the ratio up, became seemingly less appealing. So again, so this is a totally different beast. We got a pretty high input here. We got a fairly quick attack to take off some of the transient. We got a fairly slow release anywhere in here, depending on the length that you may want from this bass drum. And then it seems like a low ratio setting is pretty nice for that. Okay, so let's go to inside kick here, see what we get. Okay, so here we have the attack, just like we did with the other more dead sound, but you can hear there's some length to this one. So I'm sure as we turn up the ratio here, or sorry, the input, we're going to hear some more of that length. And I'm hitting fairly quiet here, so let's see what the input does. Let's see if it starts to distort, if it gets more appealing or less. So it seems like a mid setting may be kind of cool, and we're definitely getting that kind of expanding sound. Let's mess with the attack here. Seems like the more we kind of quicken the attack to grab the transient, the more of that initial high sound we got. Pretty interesting. Let's stay there and mess with the release. Again, this is pretty interesting. I don't know. The faster attack seems to actually have more attack, which is usually the opposite of everything else. And somewhere in this kind of mid range for the release, it seems interesting. I'm gonna dial that up and then mess with the ratio. some really interesting sounds. My favorite things out of here are kind of finding these like faux electronic sounds with our quick attacks and maybe slow releases on some of these, or messing with the input to get some distortion on some of these things. So compression has like endless possibilities. Okay, so we've seen some of this in our snare and now in our kick drum if you watch both these videos, and we'll just keep messing with these in this series and see what kind of crazy sounds we can get just using compression, no EQ, and fairly basic miking. All right, take care. See y'all soon.